This is a test. 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 Hiya.
Yep, okay.
Julia, is it alright if I just leave those there?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Julia Krysiak and I'm one of the events team at UE Bristol, and I'm delighted to be bringing you our final spring BDAS event in collaboration with the Festival of Nature 2025. You are in for an incredible treat. Rarely do you get a panel so enthusiastic, so very passionate and positive in their field. Tonight you're going to hear all about rivers. A swan song to the watery veins of our planet, new ways of seeing our rivers, the science going on to monitor and understand them better, and, importantly, an exploration of the simple ways in which you can help support river research, as well as how you can enjoy your local rivers more easily and more frequently. Before we proceed, I wanted to advise you that there are no planned fire drills, so if you do hear an alarm go off, do please go through the exits here and the watershed staff will lead you out. After the conversation in Waterside 3, right across the cafe bar to the other end, we will have some lovely drinks together. But without further ado, as we have all of these lovely speakers to introduce to you, I wanted to first welcome our host this evening. Possibly one of the most enthusiastic academics I have ever met. You are going to be led. You are going to be led on a journey of river discovery by UE Bristol's own Professor Darren Reynolds, Pro Vice Chancellor for Research and Knowledge Exchange. Darren unashamedly describes himself as nuts about science and has spent over 30 years trying to turn human ideas into useful things that exist in real life, especially those that can help people and the planet. Darren says that above all, he is passionate about rivers and has spent much of his life being near them, playing in them, listening to and studying them, the unsung heroes in the carbon cycle. It is such a wonderful world, says Darren. And on that marvellously positive note, I would like to invite Ellie Turner-Wallace, Head of Programmes from the Natural History Consortium, up onto the stage to tell you more about the Festival of Nature and introduce our speakers properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, and welcome everyone. So I'm Ellie Turner-Wallace from the Natural History Consortium, which is a charitable partnership of 13 organisations. As one of our founding partners, UE have been helping us to run the Festival of Nature for over 20 years. Each year they help us to curate a packed programme full of events, including this wonderful panel, and also, I have to mention it, our fantastic Wild Weekend event, which is this Saturday and Sunday down at Millennium Square. So lots of free family activities and also an opportunity to come and meet other UE researchers as well. So we hope to see you there too. This year, for the first time, we're exploring the theme of water. UE have leapt to the challenge and put together this incredible panel of speakers, all passionate about rivers. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce them to you. So in no particular order, we have Mehbooba Ferdoush, is a single mother of 3 children, 2 of whom have special needs, and is a survivor of domestic abuse. She lives with a range of health conditions, including fibromyalgia, anxiety, depression, long COVID, IBS, and migraines. In 2021, she took up swimming, which became a turning point, helping her to manage pain, reduce stress, and reconnect with herself. Mehbooba has a great love for nature and open water swimming, especially in rivers and lakes, giving her a profound sense of calm and connection. Next we have Emma Brisdion. She is the Campaigns and Communications Manager at the Rivers Trust. A podcaster and also a keen kayaker, spending most of her time with the River Avon, walking beside it or paddling along it. A UE Alum, having completed a Master's in Science Communication several years previously, she now delivers campaigns that connect communities with river health and citizen science, and lean on policymakers to create a healthier future for our waterways. Dr. Eva Perrin is also a UWE alum, a freshwater scientist with a background in river pollution. Eva completed her PhD in 2023, focusing on bacterial processes in rivers and their implications for ecosystems' health. Eva is currently a postdoctoral research fellow in river pollution at the University of Plymouth, developing a catchment monitoring framework to explore more integrated approaches to pollution monitoring, involving citizen scientists, community groups, diverse stakeholders, and multiple data types using novel technologies. Eva also has experience in environmental campaigning, seeking to influence local legislation and improve water quality for recreational use. And last but not least, we have Lyche. She is the Chief Sustainability and Social Impact Officer at Additive Catchments. There she leads the ESG, social license and net zero programs, designing strategies and driving solutions for sustainability across our ecosystem. Hedvig leads Additive Catchments communications and community engagement activities, ensuring greater cross-sector collaborations for environmental stewardship. She has held global leadership roles across sustainability and communications, working with clients in government, corporations and foundations. Passionate about giving nature a voice and a seat at the table, she's always exploring ways to define more circular, empathetic, collaborative and regenerative solutions that work for and with nature. It now gives me the great pleasure to hand this panel over to Professor Darren Reynolds to explore rivers together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. Welcome, everybody. Good evening to you all. Really pleased that we've managed to pull you in out of the incredible weather that's just descended upon us. I almost felt like jumping into the river a little bit earlier on because I was a little bit hot and bothered. Okay, so we'll just crack on, shall we? So I'll try and make a splash early on, and that's the last one, I promise. I remember as a kid, I used to go down to the reservoir, the rivers, and I used to go frogging and do all that sort of stuff. And that's a really vivid memory I have of growing up, and I came from a very industrial part of the UK, so kind of, South Yorkshire, lots of coal, lots of steel. And that was a real sort of breakthrough for me. That was a real sort of, space where I could go and sort of enjoy nature. And so in my professional life, I've been very lucky to go all over the place, including India. And I thought I knew rivers well, but having explored the Ganges, and in particularly not just the enormity of it, but the connection it has with people, really struck me to the core, actually. I was really, really shocked about that. And I just thought this connection that we have with our rivers, we are fundamentally, in a really complex way, connected. Not just individually, but as communities. Look like communities growing on great river banks and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just interested to sort of hear some of your views around that connectedness with people and rivers. And I was very struck with the introduction, Mehbooba, about the role that rivers play for you. And
Yeah, I just, from where I came, I didn't never learn to swim. So 2021, I learned to swim. And then someone told me that if you go to the, cold water swimming, it is good for your fibromyalgia. So I thought, let's give a try. And first time I was in the cold water, it was shocking, it was a real shock. But after that, I feel so relaxed, so calm. Mentally, I was so much depressed because I was going through an abusive relationship. So I was, with the special needs children, it was like a lots going on in my life. And suddenly I feel like that water makes me relieve all the stress. When I'm in the water, I'm not thinking about anything, even my children. I'm just exploring the nature. I'm feeling the nature and the, the relaxation, and nothing else. Like, this is like a calmness in my mind. So I feel like, oh, that's the thing I have to do.
And do you access? Are you sort of accessing rivers locally? So
Yes, yeah.
where do you go swimming?
Conham River Avon, yeah. So I was like, it's lovely to be there, to be honest. The nature, the smell, the birds, and everything I love, because I'm a nature lover.
And do you brave that water in the winter as well, or?
Yes,
Oh,
winter
crikey,
all over
yeah.
the year. Yes.
Yeah, like that.
Or summer, winter, especially winter, I love it. It's like so cold, and it makes me more relaxed. I don't know why. I love it.
Do you have any more? Are we going to confess? Or do you have any more swimmers head out in the rivers? Are we going to end up now?
I'm a free diver, but I don't do that in rivers.
Well,
I do
it's a
that
bit
in
shallow,
oceans.
yeah.
But
I don't think you'd see much if you went free diving in the river.
but I did. My love has always been for the ocean predominantly, but I lived for quite a few years in Bali and around Southeast Asia, and saw the clogging of the rivers that fed into the ocean and the death of those rivers based on pollution, garbage, and lack of understanding and education. And we did a bit of research around some of the islands and showing locals a picture of a beach with coconuts on it and leaves, and then a picture of a beach with plastic, garbage on it, and they didn't understand the difference. And so it's become so innate to them that garbage is just part of nature. And it was such a frightening wake-up call that there's no recognition that what we're doing to nature is actually becoming normal to us. And so that kind of really resonated with me, because I saw all of that flowing into the ocean, and I felt the oceans dying as I kind of, swam around in it. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a trigger for me that connected back to rivers from the love of oceans, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm sure you won't mind me, but where are you from originally?
I'm Norwegian.
Norwegian. So do you get a sense that there's quite a different approach to how Norwegians view their wonderful fjords and rivers and that kind of stuff as to what maybe we do here in the UK?
I think we have because there's so few of us and there's so much nature, we have a very natural relationship to the nature around us. We're not as confined by concrete and buildings that you are here. We're not channeling our rivers in the same way that you are. There's a lot more open flow, there's a lot more life, but I'm not sure. I think we talked about kind of the shifting baseline syndrome that we spoke about a bit. I think we still have that as well. I think we're becoming used to our rivers dying, to our fjords dying, to pollution being a natural part of our natural systems, and we're justifying that. It's like a cognitive dissonance a little bit. We kind of feel like we should do something, but it feels natural. And I think that's a global phenomenon that we need to break. Right?
Yeah. And I guess, how do you think generally, do you feel safe about going in rivers and swimming? Are you happy to do that? Do you have any concerns about when you go into a river and swim?
It's a very leading question.
How do you feel, Darren?
Well, I do a lot of science, so I'm not. Yeah, I'm quite wary these days about a lot of rivers. I'm very pick and choose. A lot of it's about context, about whether they're urban. Check out the kind of maps, whether they're sewage output, that kind of stuff. So it's much more of a logistical. Kind of ruins it a bit actually, because you can't kind of just want to go out and do it. So, but now I have a little checklist where I think, shall I go there? No. So yeah, I'm a lot more cautious. I'm certainly cautious, and I was, I've got a couple of kids, and I definitely was a lot more cautious with my kids and stuff like that. But you do a lot of swimming, don't you, Eva?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you?
Well, I feel really lucky, like a bit like Hedvig. I grew up in North Wales, Gogledd Cymru. And yeah, like swimming there was just like a thing to do because there wasn't much else to do. That and climbing mountains, basically. So yeah, I feel like it felt like very integrated with our culture. And to be honest, growing up, I never thought about pollution, river pollution, agricultural pollution, sewage pollution. I'd like never thought about it. I just loved water, and the sea too. And yeah, it wasn't until like rivers became more of an empirical thing for me, because I studied environmental science, and I did my PhD with Darren at UWE, and yeah, I think that is actually when I learned about pollution in rivers, and yeah, and at that point I was obviously living in Bristol. It was lockdown. I lived in like a little flat in St Paul's, like without a garden, and obviously we couldn't go outside. And so I think up until that point, like I'd never really swam in rivers in Bristol, and I sort of always associated it with this pristine, type of environment that we have in North Wales. And yeah, that's when I started swimming in the Avon. And we'll talk more about like the community group sort of stuff that's happening in Bristol later, and the like group that we formed on the Avon to kind of protest against sewage pollution. But yeah, I think it was kind of a really important like crutch for me to be able to like access nature and water at the same time as doing the PhD. It kind of like brought the empirical side of it out a little bit, but still like contextualized the science as well. And yeah, and I haven't swum in the Avon probably in a couple of months because I no longer live in Bristol, but yeah. So
well, you're here now, aren't you?
Yeah,
you know, only 45 more minutes to go, and I think you can plunge, take the plunge. But I mean, I think, obviously, I've sort of been doing this sort of stuff for a long time, really, and nobody really listens to scientists, I find, not generally. I'm not feeling sorry for myself, but I think they're much more inclined to listen to communities and that kind of stuff. And I know, obviously, now it's much more, the discussion is really, really out there. There's all sorts of, it's very emotional as well, I find. The discussion is very emotional. And sometimes I think it's quite difficult for people, certainly with the chats I've had, to really get to the bottom of things, or to kind of get to the facts, to sort of understand clearly, what this is. And it's a complicated problem, a complicated space. But Emma, I know your one of your roles is communications, isn't it? At the Rivers Trust. So, I mean, how have we arrived at this place? Why are we talking about it so much?
Well, I think there are so many reasons why we're worried about our rivers, right? And
Yeah.
I think basically the underpinning thing to remember is everything that happens on land affects our waterways, and there's that disconnect. I think we don't really tend to think about, okay, farmers spreading stuff on fields. Why would you ever make the link with that kind of going into our rivers until you sit and think about it, or someone shows you that our soil and everything on or in our soil gets washed into our rivers? If you drop a piece of litter in a city, often that's kind of the last thing you think about, right? Apart from perhaps, somebody maybe will put that in the bin, let's hope so. Often the thought isn't, well, that's probably also going to get washed into our rivers at some point in heavy rain. So there are so many reasons why our rivers are suffering, even if we're just looking at sources of pollution, but also historically we've not treated them as something to love. I mean, we've set up our settlements in the places that we live. We've always lived alongside rivers because they've offered us a way to get from A to B, a way to connect with communities, a way to trade, a way to provide us with food. So we've all living kind of in and on rivers, but then we've tried to contain them. We've tried to, make them into very tight channels. We've not given them space to breathe as they should, because they're these living, amazing ecosystems. We don't give them room to flood on their natural floodplains anymore because we're building up on them. We've put drainage ditches in our land, which has really helped agriculture for a period of time, but now we've learned that actually that's really, degraded our kind of soils. That we've done so many things to rivers that haven't treated them for the amazing spaces they are, that now they're basically crying out for help. And we're starting to listen, which is really positive. I think a lot of people are now starting to realise, oh my God, we really do need rivers, but they really need us. And that's what's been amazing. All of us, we were saying earlier before, the last couple of years have been amazing in terms of a groundswell of community voices coming through and saying what can I do? Why have we got into this mess? We're starting to understand that now. I mean, there are still gaps in our knowledge. We don't necessarily know all of the messes that our rivers are in, but we know enough to go, oh my God, we need to get on with it. And we do know enough about some of it that we've got some amazing tools to start treating our rivers right.
I mean, maybe when you go swimming, is it sort of, do you worry about these things, or are you more in the moment? You live for the moment. You get there, off you go. You're in there, and you're upstream, sort of doing that. So
especially on the river, I can't dip my face. I can't dip my head. This is very frustrating because I want to feel everything. In the lake, when I swim, lake water is clear, so you can dip your head and, you can feel all the thing. So in the river, I feel so sad, like, that you are there, you're swimming, but pollution is there. So if you want, you can't do that.
And how do you know it's there? What sort of?
It's the water is not clear, You can see that also, because I don't swim alone. I swim with a group, or so we talk about these things. So this is, and also when I did the documentary Avon for the Avon, so I came to know lots of things about the pollution of this. So first time when I said, can I dip my head? They said, no, I can't. You can swim only, but you can't dip your head.
So you're
So
very
it's
upright when you're.
upright, so you can
that's
feel
very
it, you can
correct. That's a
feel
very
it.
correct technique. Yeah, but that is a genuine sort of discussion that you as a group you have when you're using these places. That's
Yes.
yeah.
I think it's interesting though, with like what Emma was saying, that we're treating the rivers have become, like I think you mentioned earlier, a commodity. It's a product that we use for our benefit. It's not an ally to us anymore, which it should be. And I think it's, I don't know if you've read Is a River Alive? I don't know if anyone has read that book, but I mean,
Robert McFarlane, that one, isn't it?
Yes.
The river, yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book.
Yeah.
But one thing that kind of stood out to me was like so many of indigenous people in like New Zealand, Canada, across the world, they relate to rivers as persons. So they say this river who is alive. And in English, we don't use that relatable wording with nature. We detached ourselves. And that justifies us killing it, in a sense, because it's there for us to use, not for us to live in harmony. And I think that's a lot of the work that we have to do, is recognize that we are all interconnected and we all do depend on each other. And that lesson, that pivoting, that change, I think, is what will help everyone kind of recognize, okay, we are in synergy, we are in symbiosis, and we all depend on each other. It's not something for us to use. It's something that feeds us and helps us, and we have to strengthen and nurture it back. I think that's a lot of that.
I find that quite an
conversation.
instinctive thing to, if somebody says there's a river alive, I don't think I would have to think about it very long.
They are literally alive.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah, like literally,
Yeah.
it's not figurative even. I find it really nice though that I think like we think from a scientific perspective, like we actually know they are alive, but also people who maybe haven't even studied the science behind it just know instinctively anyway, and that's why we have this huge movement about what you were just talking about, like rights of nature, legal personhood for rivers and things, and yeah, I think it just makes sense, doesn't it, that people instinctively know that. We spend a lot of time around rivers, and they're friends, and we get to know them, and yeah, and also from a scientific perspective, like they are alive. They play a massive, disproportionately huge role in global cycles, not just on a local scale for that catchment, but they regulate global systems and nutrient cycles, essential nutrients for life. Bacteria in rivers, a lot of the research that Darren and I did during my PhD was showed that the bacteria in rivers are hugely impacted by whatever we put in to rivers, in the same way that our guts and our bodies are impacted by anything that we put in it. And yeah, I mean, like Emma was saying, whatever happens on the land ends up in a river ultimately. But yeah, also where I live in Newquay, in Cornwall now, we have had these 2 humpback whales hanging around loads in the bay, and everyone's obsessed with them. And I find it a really interesting kind of, that's a pipeline between whatever you put on the land affects the rivers, but actually ultimately whatever happens in the rivers, that's will eventually feed up to the top of the food chain. But nobody thinks about, I don't know, the link between the beginning and the end of that kind of pipeline.
I mean, just for the record, you did pretty much all the research on that. I was just I just provided the odd cup of coffee. That's how I remembered it. But thanks for the tag. I mean, that living stuff. Yeah, I mean, I find that really quite. I find that immensely, really, really interesting. I mean, can I ask I can do this, can I? I can ask the audience, who is that something that is what we're talking about a bit strange? Who thinks rivers are alive? If you could show me your hands, and who put them down now? That's good. And who thinks that that's a bit of a strange concept? Great. Yeah, that's fair enough. That's it. That's good. Yeah. Okay. That's right.
Come on down.
So,
Discuss.
yeah. I mean, so I think we have the very sort of this very strong human thing, don't we, with rivers? You know how, and I think one of the things that I'm mindful of, I don't know, there's a bit of me that thinks we're quite selfish as well. You know, let's say, 'cause what rivers do for us as humans. You know, and I think there are some really amazing things, you know, like that sort of that well-being, that sort of calmness, that sort of connection. I think is really important. But I think the other thing that I really am interested in is that rivers do a lot. They do a lot of stuff, right? Which is they would do without humans. You know, like they're incredibly important for biodiversity, for example. They really, you know, they move around a lot of carbon and stuff, don't they? And nutrients and things like that. And to me, they like kind of represent sort of like a gut. You know, they're like sort of what our guts do. We chuck. I did put something in the intro, which Julie didn't put in, which was that, you know, rivers are very good at sort of, they take this carbon from old carbon, from landscapes, and then they move it, and ultimately it ends up somewhere along the line as a molecule, as a humpback whale, as a molecule that's out there, and of course that whole kind of thing, that whole thing starts again. And you know, and I think in the when you asked me for information, I put it's a bit like sprouts at Christmas, but at scale, isn't it? You know, we're all putting these sprouts in, and then you know, before too long, they're appearing somewhere else, usually round about the King's Speech or something like that. I don't know, but that's actually what rivers do. They're kind of living guts, I guess. Water. What has anyone got any thoughts about, or can we just? Do you want to just move on? But they're all kind of watery guts.
I'm not going to comment on the sprout thing, but
You're missing out there, Heather. You're missing out there.
but they are. You know, we talk about rivers as the veins of our planet, right? And it's the same with our bodies. If we clog our veins, obviously going to end up with, you know, in cardiac arrest or, you know, massive obesity or any kind of all of the diseases that flow with it. And it's the same with rivers. Like we chuck all this stuff into it, not the good stuff, but the bad stuff. And we clog them up and we hold them in and we basically slow the flow, kill the biodiversity, and we basically kill the body, which is the planet, and with the planet goes us. So it's like a self-enlightenment, really, like a self-preservation, looking after the veins of our planet, because they're ultimately the ones that keep us alive, I think, at the end of the day. So I think it's self-enlightenment, I think it's kind of...
do you think there's lots of, I guess, appreciation of rivers outside of, you know, the kind of recreational side, the well-being side, the kind of keen bird watchers, you know, anglers? You know, there's that stuff that happens underneath, isn't there, that is almost invisible because it's so small. And, you know, we don't... I think we were chatting before we came in, and we don't get any deliveries, right, on Earth. So we just... the only thing we get is sunlight. Everything that we have is fixed, carbon, nitrogen, all that kind of stuff. And rivers are one of those things that play that kind of really useful role in sort of moving stuff around and, you know, making humpback whales eventually or whatever, you know, that kind of stuff. Do you think there's enough sort of appreciation of those kind of things, or does there have to be even? I don't know.
You know, something that interests me is I was speaking to a friend the other day, and she was, you know, interested, like kind of knows that I'm a bit obsessed with rivers, so very kindly spoke to me gently about rivers for a bit. And obviously wants to talk about sewage because that's the thing that's grabbing headlines. But as we were chatting, like, I realised she didn't even have a, like, and she's by far from alone in this, she didn't even think about the fact that our tap water comes from our rivers. Yeah. They offer us so many things, not just as recreational spaces. We literally depend on them to, you know, drink and to be clean. And they're just, I think there's a breakdown in communication and the way that rivers are celebrated, because at the moment they're not vilified. I mean, the pollution of them is vilified, and we're constantly talking about how damaged they are, but we don't also talk about why we need to protect them so much. Like, yes, we talk about wildlife, but like, we're going to run out of water in the next, like the rate of water use, like independently and by businesses in the UK is higher than some of our European neighbours. And we are facing like a water scarcity crisis. And it's not that it's not just rainwater that is going into reservoirs that that is filled up this lovely bottle here, a lot of it's abstracted from our rivers. And they're under so much pressure from so many things. But we don't celebrate them and go, thank you, God, thank you, rivers, for giving us water that we literally need for every facet of our lives. So I think there's a huge communication piece as well that should be like way less focused on the negative, because that can be so depressing and then nobody wants to do anything about it because it seems like a mountain. We also need to celebrate and start at the very basics and connect people with the concept of rivers being just wonderful. I mean, I think most of us in the room, based on the fact that almost everyone put their hands up to say, yes, a river's alive, like, we all love rivers, right? But we need everybody else to do that as well. Like, we're in a bit of an echo chamber here. Like, we need to spread those ripples and bring more people into this club of, like, rivers are great, let's look after them.
I also think, like, even within the scientific community, rivers have been overlooked for years. Like we were talking about those important processes that they play in, you know, underpinning global cycles. But for years, rivers were literally just seen as a bit of a black box, like in global carbon budgets. Nobody really knew what they did or understood it, and they're a bit too complicated. And that's because of the disproportionate role that they play. They're so complicated because they're such dynamic systems. Things happen a lot quicker than they do, like in the ocean, for example. And there's constantly inputs that are constantly changing throughout seasons, and, you know, as a result of pollution events and human activities, building and catchments and things. And yeah, I think for years, and even still to a certain extent, yeah, they are kind of just a bit of a black box, and they were massively overlooked. And anything, obviously, that impacts, you know, the catchment and anything that's going into the rivers is going to impact those processes as well, and it's constantly changing, and so we can't really keep up with it. But yeah, I think, yeah, certainly even within the scientific community, they have always been quite overlooked.
I think that's interesting, to your point as well, is that we can't really change what we can't see, and we can't really understand or protect what we can't measure, or, you know, we lack insights really and understanding as to what's actually happening in the rivers, right? Like, I mean, we work a lot on data, you know, like real-time data monitoring of the health of the river to actually understand what's going on in there, but it goes to everything that you guys are doing, like citizen science. Like, we need to understand before we can act, and I think that's where we're getting to as society now. Like, okay, let's understand what's happening here, and then what do we need to do to change that? And that's, I feel like, really positive about that shift from like an industry perspective, from a science perspective, from a organizational kind of NGO perspective. It's like, okay, let's understand what's going on, and then let's together, because it takes all of us, let's together then figure out what our roles are to help address these issues that we now have transparency and visibility of, which we haven't had before. And that, to me, is a really hopeful message, that we're getting to that point now where we're starting to understand what's going on in the environment around us.
You're dealing in lots of, can I say the word, it's AI-driven technology, right? AI.
Yeah, it's such
but isn't that sort of, I mean, surely, is there not sort of an opportunity to really capture lots of data? So some of that data could be really, it could be from planners, it could be from councils, it could be from scientists, but it also could be from communities and swimmers, you know, in that, and the citizen base, and a way of kind of organising that information in a way that's kind of useful to us in some way. You know, so I've got these, I've already got this dream of giving Mehbooba a super sensing swimsuit, right, with lots of tech, yeah, while he can swim at the Avon and back, and then we can get all this data, triangulate it, and shove it up to the cloud and do some AI stuff, whatever that means.
100%. We need all of that. We need our AI data and our river data. We need citizen science data. We need community data. This is why it's not a one. No one can do this alone, right? And I think this is where we're kind of getting to. And I love the fact that there's like 4 women up here, because I think it takes a bit of a feminine lens, value, systems change to drive that shift, because it does take collaboration, it takes empathy, it takes care, it takes kind of interconnectedness to really understand that we need all of us and all the data that comes from, you know, personal experience, what I feel and see and you know, experience when I'm in the river, you know, what you learn from the citizen science, what you get from the communities telling you, this is what I want, this is what I feel, and from, you know, data, you know, and I think we need all of these layers to get the full picture of what's going on, and then everyone gets agency, you know, everyone feels like there's contribution, because I think a lot of the anger that I'm sensing is communities going, or people going, well, all of this is just happening kind of to me or to my river and to something that I love, and I don't have a role to play in what we do about that. And I think we need to shift that. We need to give
if I was to
voice
sort of
back.
gently sort of push a little
Sorry.
bit on that, well, I mean push back, I suppose. I mean, do you think we take enough responsibility individually? You know, I mean, I think it's sometimes quite, you know, it's good, isn't it? I mean, it's satisfying to kind of point and blame, but do you think, do we take enough responsibility in the stuff that, in our actions, in the stuff that we do? Are we sort of trusting everything that in the state is looking after everything, and we shouldn't really have to worry about everything? But, you know, we wash our cars, don't we, in drinking water. We, you know, water our plants in drinking water. We do lots of things, I think, don't we? Which maybe, on reflection, we maybe could do a bit differently.
I don't think we're given the opportunity a lot of the time to be or feel included in, like, all of this kind of stuff. Like, I think there's two main ways that rivers are monitored, and they are very, very separate to how people interact with rivers. Like, I just think everything is so separate, and, like, yeah, like the main ways that rivers are monitored are two, like, official frameworks called the Water Framework Directive and also kind of the Bathing Water Directive, I guess. And none of it uses third-party data. So citizen science data isn't included, local knowledge isn't included. Yeah, and I think it's a lot of the time been community groups and NGOs, people like the Rivers Trust and local Rivers Trust, local catchment partnerships that have been like plugging that gap and kind of galvanising the support that people want to give and the energy that people have, you know, to give to this cause. And yeah, have been essentially using that to try and move the issue forward. But I think in terms of like official monitoring frameworks, there isn't really an opportunity for people to feel like they can do much or that they can be involved because it just doesn't really use that type of, it doesn't really think in that way. It's quite rigid.
I think I agree, and I think this is where the change is happening. I mean, we work with the Rivers Trust, and we work with the University of Plymouth, and we're trying to like bring all this data together, because I think you're 100% right, that people don't, it's too detached, right? Nature's detached, and the agency to do something about it is detached. There is too many barriers between me and what's actually going on in that river. So it's being done to me, and I don't have any say in it. And I think that's where the work for Rivers Trust, work of science, work of like community groups come in and have to have a voice at that table, right? It's imperative that we listen to all these groups who are there living and breathing it. And at the moment, it's not really happening, but there's change here, right? I feel like there's momentum now for these conversations.
I think there's a massive fundamental shift in local action. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I used to dream of, maybe in the wrong way, but I used to dream of rivers being front page news, you know, being at the right, you know, in the consciousness of everybody talking about them. And I think that's really, really happened a lot, you know, the last few years. That's, to me, is quite interesting. But I think also as well, the kind of like that ability to think that you're moving forward and come up with good solutions. I don't know, I don't get a sense that we're always moving in a purposeful way and in a really sort of sensible way, because there's a, you know, well, yeah, do we ever? That's a good point, yeah. But it's like, always seems to be quite reactionary, you know, to sort of, and I know there's like loads of really boring details, you know, in terms of legislation and monitoring and things like that. But, you know, we're not really, it seems to me, having a real fundamental, like, you know, nobody wants to pay more for their water bills, for example, but why not? Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like, or should nobody pay? I don't know. I mean, it's sort of this, and it's funny that you were talking earlier about the, you know, this like commoditisation, because I was driving, you know, I was coming into Bristol, and I saw that kind of congestion zone sign, and then I think, yeah, so we're obviously commoditising clean air, and then there's all these issues around water bills that are going up, and you think, well, we're commoditising clean water, and then you start thinking, you know, what is that where we're heading? Where, you know, and I think I was very interested in, and I think way back in the 90s, I guess, maybe mid-90s, a lot of scientists were very keen on commoditising things because we felt at that time that we could use it as a lever to drive change. But actually, when you commoditise something, it's like anything else. It can be bought, or it loses its value, or that. Do you think there's something bit in that, or not? Well, that was a bit of a tumbleweed moment, wasn't it? We'll be back after a short break, everyone.
No, I think this is comes back to what we've been talking about. It's around the whole, is a river alive kind of question again, right? I mean, if we treat our natural resources as commodities, we have kind of answered that question as a society, and we say no, because otherwise it's slavery, right? I mean, and we kind of abolished that a while ago, and so our societal answer seems to be no, because we commoditize it, but our human kind of hearts and emotion feeling, all of us are saying yes. So there's a massive, again, cognitive dissonance in terms of how we treat our natural resources versus what we actually think that they should be, and I think that's, I don't know how we do that, because I don't know the answer, but that's where we need to break, right? We need to bring that alleness, interconnectedness, that kind of, that collaboration between us and nature more closer to reality in a way, and we do that by understanding it, by listening to it, by kind of recognizing the value that it offers us.
But as much as that anger has bubbled up, right, and there's been lots of people that have gone on marches and protests and all that kind of stuff, there's also a lot of love. I've also seen a lot of love. That's the bit, going back to your point, Mehbooba, about how you feel. A lot of people showing a lot of care, for their rivers, and it drives me bonkers, when you go around places and you can't even see the river because we've decided we're going to build a 5-foot wall. Yeah, that's it. And then you have a pier over the top, and there's a mandatory traffic cone, a sort of a small bike, and then a shopping trolley, and then a fridge, and it's like I forgot what that game show was, but it's like that conveyor belt of things going in. And there's something, isn't it? I mean, you go down the docks. As a lovely development, and that's obviously linked in with maybe house prices, but you just go out of Bristol a little bit, you go into, I don't know, Easton, for example, or on the outskirts, and all of a sudden it really changes, that kind of, that show of rivers and how rivers connect, with our, that changes a lot. But that love, I think, and we've got a little clip somewhere, haven't we? We've got a little thing about something. What's this? That was a really bad link.
A little thing about something.
Swims down the river with the big boat. Yeah, we do. The mermaid. So yeah, getting married to the river. Julie, Mrs. Alum. Bring it back in.
Like it doesn't look like it.
Sometimes the levels are worse than others.
This, I believe, used to say prohibited.
When did this first arrive?
Possibly in response to the commotion you've been causing by the campaign.
Onto agenda petition debate to address sewage pollution in the Avon.
I owe £1,091.
He's not paying his bills because he's not getting service.
I don't agree that that's the case with West Water, and we can talk about that now.
Oh, sad now.
You've got to get in the water at some point.
Okay.
I swim in the river most days, rain or snow. If I don't do this, I'm going to go nuts.
Oh, I hear you. That is nice. Lovely. Okay. Keep going. We're just there for each other. And the water takes the pain away. What to say? This will be my first time swimming in Bali. I'm a little bit nervous. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, it'll be fine. You never want to get out.
But I like to go underwater.
Because I know how clean this roof is. And I don't go underwater.
And I really like somewhere I love it.
It's going to make heavens. Do you call on all the courage and determination you possess to raise awareness of the issues facing this and every river? I do.
That was quite good, wasn't it? So, we've got 2 stars of that that trailer there. Do you want to tell us? So it was Rave on the Avon, right? I've got that right now. I'm a bit late.
We'll
I know, but-
contextualise
Yeah.
it.
Okay. But do you want to tell us a little bit about that, you two?
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah. So that was a clip from a film which I feel like probably quite a few people here have already seen, or maybe will be familiar with. But it's called Rave on for the Avon. It was produced by like a really, really close friend of ours called Charlotte Sawyer. And yeah, it's just the story of like everybody in Bristol who feels connected to the river, like the threads that the river has that run through our city, and kind of how, yeah, people came together over a period of years, kind of starting when Charlotte started filming, maybe 2021, I think, 2020. Yeah, for a couple of years to kind of advocate for the river and the connection that people have for the river. Yeah, as I was saying earlier, when I was doing my PhD, a group of us, like local swimmers who swim at Conham, which probably most of you will recognise from the clips, kind of became aware that essentially no water quality testing was happening on the Avon at Conham, even though like so many people swam there, especially over lockdown because it was so hot. And yeah, we basically had no data at all. There was a little bit of data, obviously for like ecological status kind of stuff, so we knew that the river was, you know, fairly polluted. Obviously, I mean, we could see that anyway. But yeah, there was no routine monitoring for indicators of bacteria that are harmful to health, basically. And so what we started doing was kind of set up like a citizen science program, basically, to do regular water quality testing every week at Conham. And alongside that, we were sort of campaigning locally with like local councillors, but also nationally to try and get it officially designated as a bathing water, which would mean that the regulator would come and test it frequently rather than us. And yeah, that wasn't successful for reasons that is described in the film, but yeah, Charlotte just started filming us basically, and then it kind of snowballed from there, and yeah, it was amazing. And you know, Mehbooba obviously features, and also our beautiful bride.
First time I was in the river.
Yeah. Is that the first time?
First time,
So they captured your first dip?
Yes.
Wow. Well, that's a bit of a revelation. And there's that real sense about how much some people really connect with it. It's like it provides a space maybe for people to go and, I don't know, heal or to feel better. And, you know, I realise that sort of time's moving on a little bit, and I'm sort of quite keen, if that's all right with you lot, is to so where do we go from here? You know, how do we move forward? You know, I mean, it's going to involve us, it's going to involve government, it's going to involve the water companies, you know. And I have to say, you know, I'm not defending anybody or anything, but certainly in the conversations I've had with people in the industry, and even in the water industry, there's a lot of people who really care. You know, it's not sort of this easy thing. You know, there are a lot of people that really, really care about our rivers, and absolutely don't go out there, you know, to sort of harm our rivers. You know, they really don't. I've really had some of those conversations with people. But what do you reckon? What is it? Technology? Is it community? Is it government? I mean, it's going to be all of them. But you know, how do we move on?
Which one do you want to start with?
Go for it, Emma. Go.
I mean, we all have responsibilities, right? Whether they're personal things that we can do at home, to adding our voice to big campaigns and creating that sort of community movement, finding your community, taking a job that does something that you feel passionate about, that makes a difference, or, you know, being part of sort of lobbying government, or indeed we've talked about data quite a lot. Like every single one of us can become a citizen scientist, and there's loads of different sort of levels of which you can do that as well. So starting at the very bottom, I run something called the Big River Watch, which happens twice a year. You literally just go look at a river. We've got a survey on an app, and you just tell us what you see. And that not only helps people spend like a lovely bit of time getting to know their river, which is really important, like fall in love with your space, you want to protect it, but it helps us kind of build this nationwide picture of river health. But you don't necessarily need to know what you're looking at. You know, there's guides in the app as well. So the word citizen science can sometimes be a bit off-putting, I think, but it really is quite entry level. Then you could go and do something like river fly monitoring, like learn to go and survey the insects that are living in our river. Not only are they absolutely some of the coolest things I've ever seen, I did it last week with somebody, one of our colleagues, so weird and amazing, but they're an amazing sort of, well, they can tell you what the health of the river is, because they don't survive in dirty water effectively. So if you're going out every month and looking for these amazingly cool creatures, and you see them doing well or not doing well, I mean, it helps your connection with rivers, but it also means that you're getting a really important sort of baseline bit of understanding that can be then fed into like the Environment Agency, for example. If you don't meet like a threshold number of these species in your survey, you report that to the Environment Agency and they have to come out and look at it. There are so many mechanisms that you can get involved in. Or then there's like, you know, supporting campaigns. So we've got petitions and things running at the moment. Like I'm launching one on Friday that you should all sign. It's called Making Space for Water. Yes. And it's about like restoring our landscape with nature-based solutions and creating like long nature-rich corridors alongside our rivers, which is what they should have. They should have this jacket of nature around them to interact with, but they don't. So we're basically asking government to provide more mechanisms of funding to support our farmers and landowners to do these things. So while you yourself couldn't necessarily, I mean, unless any of you are landowners here, in which case please do, just like slap up a lovely riparian corridor. Yeah. That's not something we can do.
Yeah, plant stuff.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely with you on that. But I'm also think technology has a role to play, right, as well. I mean, we should embrace those opportunities. So the ability to collect loads of information, you know, and provide things like digital twins of the world around us to inform simulations and predict and to help with planning and to help with all those things, you know, to really do that. Because we've got tough choices, haven't we? I mean, we've got to grow more food. We're going to need more. I mean, 70% of all our water that we abstract is for growing food, right? So, you know, there has to be some, I guess, some thinking around that.
Well, I mean, digital twin, we're doing digital twin for algae as well, which is super exciting. We can talk about that later. But yes, I think from our perspective, the data, the kind of continuous water quality monitoring data, which is like every 15 seconds taking, you know, the pulse of the river to understand what's going on in it. I think our mission with that, from Additive's perspective, is to enable stakeholders like water companies and landowners and highway authorities, where it might be, to make the better decisions in nature. Like that's the ultimate goal, right? Because at the moment we're flying blind. You know, we kind of think we do something here and we're not sure. So having that total kind of transparent, holistic map of what's happening in our rivers and a catchment enables this, because like you said, they don't want to go out there and say, oh yeah, we're going to pollute, we're going to be shit people. Like no one says that, you know, everybody wants to do something good. They just don't have the insights and the tools and the ability to do that. And so that's part of what we do, is enable that. You know, here are insights for you, here are actionable insights you can use to make better decisions, like use more nature-based solutions, like that's investment decisions for water companies.
And also kind of bring in some of the big states, so bring in the water companies.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, sort of, we've got to solve this together. Right? We've got to reimagine a different way of working, right? A different way of collaborating.
And this is it. You know, if you can imagine it, we can create it. But I think this is like what Section 82, you know, the
Section
environment.
82, yeah. Section 82. Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about that. But I think there's regulatory kind of regulations, policies coming into place that puts the water companies at the moment, but I think everyone else will follow. As I was saying, you need to understand what's going on in your region, in your rivers, in your catchments. You have to monitor, you have to get the data so that you are equipped with the right insights to make better decisions in the long term. Not as an end-of-pipe solution or just tick a compliance box, but for actual long-term benefits.
When you say you, what do you mean by that? I mean, is it sort of...
You, at the moment, are talking to water companies,
Right.
but I think it's all stakeholders that have an impact on the river health.
Yeah.
It's just at the moment, water companies are being kind of regulated to have that role.
Because
but-
rivers are, they don't care for passports. They don't
No.
care for immigration control. They don't care for any of those things. They flow, they move, and if they can't, they will find a way. Yeah, and it's that for me. Certainly, in my sort of challenges in a lot of stuff we do. I guess you're the same. It's doing it at scale. I mean, I've seen you put in a lot of legwork trying to get up and down the river to do some sampling and monitoring. But the scale of things is real big challenge. I think that's where a lot of that technology and, of course, Mehbooba's super sensing swimsuit that I'm going to develop over the coming months. Right?
I would love to try it.
Yeah, well, I'm sort of being half serious actually, but anyway, but I think it is a big scale problem. So I think it really needs a real concerted sort of buy-in by everybody. Do you reckon?
Yeah, I think there's like an individual thing that people can do, and then there's the wider structural problem that needs to be addressed. I think individuals can only operate within the systems that we're given at the moment from a political and legislation perspective. And so, people can do things like apply for bathing water status for their local river to ensure that it actually gets monitored. It's only in the last few years that there's actually been any rivers that have bathing water status in the UK, which is the only way that they get officially monitored for harmful pathogens, and kind of get given a way of people understanding how risky it is for them to access the water. And obviously people can do citizen science programs and be involved in community groups, but I think there's also a wider conversation around the structures and the way that rivers are monitored and the type of data that we are acquiring. That I think it just needs to be much more holistic. We just don't have enough data at the moment. We don't really understand what a healthy river should look like because we're just not monitoring it enough. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do at the University of Plymouth on the project that I'm working on at the moment, is kind of develop a more holistic kind of model for a framework for monitoring catchments, basically, that's including data from lots of different sources, including citizen science data, local knowledge, people who've lived on that river their whole lives. They know just as well as anyone when something's off. Diverse stakeholders, and different technology types as well, I think is really important. It's quite difficult to kind of innovate new technologies at the same time as standardizing them, and I think that that's what's often held us back in terms of technology development in rivers and water quality specifically, is that all of the frameworks that we use to monitor water quality is so standardized, and they've been the way that they've been for so many years, and that's just all we know. And all the legislative
more
framework
accessible, isn't it? So we've got some of the things that you're interested in. Who knows? Maybe you'll be able to buy off Amazon for a tenner or 20 quid or something like that. We got. I know there's a guy in the audience who makes sort of printed microscopes, so you can look at those little microbes and that kind of stuff. So, and then of course you've got access potentially to that big data cloud with your mobile phone and all that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're partnering with Google to access their kind of data lake and their tools to allow us to both innovate and scale these monitoring solutions, these holistic monitoring solutions, bringing in the data science, bringing in these other partners to create something that is...
Sorry, we didn't see you. We didn't see you at all. We didn't see you. All right, stealth.
About to go jump in the river.
That was like me exiting one of my lectures. But using the first 5 minutes, to be fair.
No, to say because I agree, we're stuck in, we need to reimagine the systems as well, right? And then we need innovators and big scale innovators like Google, combined with people like us and like you, to kind of create some solutions that are applicable and usable for public as well as for industry as well as for government.
And this is not some kind of, you're in that space now.
Yes,
So good. I think we might be at a time where we're going for questions if anybody's still with us.
Thank you. It's been really fascinating, and well done, ladies, girls. I went round Wessex. I went on the tour for Wessex Water today. and ask some difficult questions. I'm an ex-Green councillor, so, you know, I had a reason for going, and I was involved with Conham as well. Yeah, hi there. So they didn't know what I was talking about. I really believe that this is about politics. People really care about their rivers. They love the swimming. You know, you're a wonderful example of what's going on, but it's about politics. And I'm an ex-local politician, and I really think you need to contact everybody, and you've got to keep doing it. And that goes for everybody in this room. Contact your councillors, contact your MP. We have a bill going through at the moment which is going to change planning and is not good for the environment. So you've got a job to do, everybody. Don't hold back.
Any more? Yeah? Do I point them out, do I? We'll go centre. I'll try and... So that lady there.
I've just finished reading Robert McFarlane's book, brilliant book, Our Rivers Alive. Is that the title?
Is the river alive?
Yeah. Is the river alive? Thank you. If the River Wye had a legal status like we as citizens do, or as corporations indeed enjoy, would it be polluted by, in the way that it shamefully is now, by poultry, the chicken farms on the banks of that river? Do you think? It's just a question.
I don't really know the ins and outs, like legally, of what legal personhood for rivers entails. I think Meg in the audience might be a really good person to talk to about that. Over here, she's our river bride, Mrs. Avon, and Meg works quite actively on that kind of stuff. But I think the one thing I'll say with regards to the Wye is that there is actually a legal case ongoing with the Wye at the moment, which is being taken forward by Lee Day, who I was actually with yesterday. And yeah, they're essentially like representing the constituents of the Wye in taking Avara Foods, and Welsh Water is now a new defendant that's been added to court for, I think, public nuisance, essentially for the pollution from the chicken farms. So yeah, but how different that would be.
If we thought of rivers as we do as people with rights, would it ever have been contemplated?
Yeah, it's a good point.
I think that's a good. I think that's a good point. I think there would certainly be more cause for legal challenge if that was the case. I mean, the thing that I find a bit disappointing about those kind of instances is they are entirely solvable. There is nothing unsolvable about that, about the Wye situation. And the great thing about rivers, you know, is if we give them a bit of a space, they will resurge. They will, you know, they will not quite there to say that we can restore them, but they will thrive if we allow them to. But the thing about, you know, managing waste from poultry and farms, it's all entirely solvable now. You know, this is not a you know, a sort of a magic trick that needs to be performed. So I guess that boils down to, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud, that boils down to investment in infrastructure, it boils down to good, strong legislation, boils down to consumers, maybe, you know, do we want to be producing chickens like that? And then there's a whole thing about the democracy of food, because actually, you know, if you're charging £15 for a chicken or £20 for a chicken, does that mean that some people can't buy chicken? So I think these are really complicated spaces, but but you're quite right, madam. The thing I find frustrating about that, it is, you know, I could see that being solved very, very quickly if there was sufficient will and investment.
There's also there's no one really accountable for the destruction of our rivers, right? And if you have legal rights, you have the right to flow freely. You have the right to be full of life. You have the right, like there are actual stipulated rights for rivers in like New Zealand, for example, and in Canada, right? And if you are, you know, harming, like if you, like we have with people, if you kind of, I don't know how you say it, but if you kind of harm the legal rights of the river, you are accountable for that. And so that changes how we perceive it. And I think instead of just asking people to love your rivers, like it actually has life, it has rights, there has legal rights. If you do something to harm those rights, you will be held accountable.
I mean, interesting. Oh, sorry, Emma, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's, just to go on that, like I think it's really interesting how we're all talking very emotionally about our rivers here, but actually there's an economic argument, which is probably a bigger driver sometimes to change. Like we're all here saying we want our rivers to be good, like yes, but also if we're working on a framework where there are like legal ramifications and economic ramifications for polluting our waterways, that can often be a bigger steer towards driving change, because quite frankly, if we're up against massive corporations who are profit-driven, have got shareholders with different ideologies perhaps than what some of us in the room would like them to have, then sometimes it needs to be where you're going to get heavily fined, and that might be the driver instead for them changing practices to something that we're more interested in, nature-based solutions and restoring rivers.
One of the things we're doing, just to kind of add to that, is that we're now trying to, well, looking at how we put the river on our board, because that to me is a very easy, natural way to give that river a voice, at a seat at a table and a voice, and so that we have to listen to that voice in any decision that we make in and for and around nature. And that's something that all corporations actually can do, you know.
And how would that voice be articulated?
So for us, it's a combination of organizations and people who will be coming together for that voice. Faith of Nature does it a bit differently, but nobody, this is to me, is such an obvious thing to put that voice and that seat front and center so that our decisions are shaped by that to a certain degree.
Yes, can't quite see. Yes. So I'll come to you, sir.
Hi, obvious question. What do politicians and stakeholders drink? Do they have some special thing that the rest of us don't know about?
Good question, yeah. Well, do you want us to answer it? What would they drink?
We drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of tap water. I think there's lots of myths. I've done a lot of work on tap water. It's pretty good stuff, and it saves on plastic bottles. I mean, there's just lots to like about good tap water. So hopefully they should be drinking tap water. And I'll swing back round. I think I was going to point to this gentleman. Oh, okay. Oh. No pressure. We'll be hanging around.
Yeah, I was going to ask you all, because I'm a bit confused really, because I thought the Environment Agency was supposed to protect our rivers. Yep. That is obviously not the case, but can you explain the role of the Environment Agency and whether you interact with them?
Who's going to tackle that? Who's going to tackle that? Hang on, that's a classic Bristol rugby pass there.
Yeah, should we just keep
I don't necessarily work with them on a regular basis. We have been involved with them over time. You're right. I mean, they are the regulatory body, and their job is to enforce those regulations. I mean, I think what I must say is I've noticed. Well, it's not noticed. It's happened. There has been historically, definitely a holing out of staff on the ground. So I think, you know, if we're going to expect these bodies to enforce, we have to give them the tools to enforce. And I would say that. I think, you know, back in the day when it was a National Rivers Authority, I think there was a big flurry, a big excitement. Decades passed, cuts were made, and a lot of those cuts were people on the ground. I mean, it's a lot of effort, you know, without technology per se, but going around taking samples, monitoring, is a lot of effort, and I think it's an impossible job to do effectively, is what I would say.
Yeah, and I guess they operate within the boundaries of, but they just enforce the legislation that exists, basically. So, you know, the shortfalls of the legislation, not necessarily the Environment Agency's shortcomings, but yeah, and also, like Darren said, they are kind of hollowed out. So, yeah.
Do they have an obligation to do a certain amount of monitoring? Or
Yeah, they have to
They
do as
do.
much monitoring as they're required to do as the legislation. I think the
Well,
problem
they
is the
do.
lack of requirement to do it. Like, yeah, we're only required to test or do like the health check on our rivers once, basically every 5 years. It's like the equivalent of us being able to go to the doctor once every 5 years. The Environment Agency do the monitoring, but the legislation says, you know, you only need to do it this often, unless it's a bathing water, in which case it's more frequent, but there are barely any bathing water rivers in the grand scheme of things. And, you know, even then it's only in the summer months. So, yeah, they're a partner in the project I work on.
We do a little bit. We don't. They're not particularly in a position to fund any work because they don't have any money. So often we engage with them as stakeholders, I would say, in the main. But you know, if you want less crime, right? A possible way of doing that is to have more, police on the ground. You know, if you as well as other things. That's not going to solve it alone. And I would say, you know, I don't know. I can't put the blame on the EA. I just think they're like a lot of government departments. They just simply don't have the person power or the capacity to really act in a way that I think the public expects.
And there's back on that though, is that where the politics comes in?
100%, yeah.
Demanding that is put right.
Yeah. I mean, politics at the end of the day, you know, these decisions. We've had decisions around the spending review. Announced today. So governments make big decisions, and we as citizens, you know, should expect some of our needs and concerns to be addressed in that. But I also think we have a personal responsibility as well. I think it's easy to sort of say this one here's to blame or this one's here to blame. I think it's a very we're all complicit and we're all part of the solution at the same time, and we can add weightings to it. I think, yeah. But I'm thinking, how, at the end of the day, useful is that? We just need to really work in a different way that achieves outcomes. That's what I'm interested in, and that to me is healthier rivers, and how we do that. I'm less, I don't know. I don't care about it, but I just think that's what I really want to get on and do before, I can't do it anymore.
I'm still confused whether it's us helping them to do their job or them helping us to help them do their job. I still don't get where they fit in.
A lot of the gaps are plugged by people like us and community groups and things like that, essentially.
The problem is perception, isn't it? Because my perception was that the Environment Agency was there to protect rivers, and obviously not.
Yeah, well, they are, but it's whether or not they're able to do that with the current resources they have.
That's the perception that you think everything's
yeah.
The good thing is you're going to have a chance to mingle with this wonderful panel alongside a glass of wine or a soft drink very shortly. So we can take the discussion there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our wonderful panel for tonight and for a very interesting discussion. So yes, through to Waterside 3 at the very end of the watershed, we've got some fabulous offerings. We've got a bookstall from the independent bookseller Bookhouse, who've gathered river-themed texts for you to enjoy at home. We've got Bristol-based poetry and performer Megan Trump. Megan, give us a wave. Who'll be representing Rave On for the Avon to answer all of your burning questions about the documentary film and her life as a river bride. We've got Professor Simon Jackson and Alistair White from Melinda Tech, who are going to who work with Eva, and who will be sharing their latest rapid water quality analysis device with anyone who'd like to see a demo and learn more. We've also got a very thought-provoking exhibition from Devon-based photographer and artist William Joshua Templeton, whose work investigates connection, the environment, and our place within it. So lots more to look forward to. While we offer these events for free, we would be really grateful in turn that you fill out one of our feedback forms that you'll get at the end of the week, so that we know what we can change for the better for the future and what you enjoyed. Thank you so much to our live stream audience for joining us this evening. A huge thank you to the Watershed and its staff for helping us put on another event so seamlessly. Mehbooba, Hedvig, Emma, Eva and Darren, thank you so much for helping us to appreciate rivers through fresh eyes, and to the Festival of Nature for collaborating with us once again this year. And a final personal thanks from me, as this is my last BDAS before I pass the baton on. I've really enjoyed bringing these events to you, and I look forward to attending them as an audience member in the future. So thank you everyone for your support and your engagement, and we'll see you for a glass of something lovely in Waterside 3. Thank you.